Hello everyone, and welcome to my Unit 4 synthesis project. Today we are going to focus on personas and why they are used in UX research. Personas has been defined by many as a user archetype. In other words, a character, someone who may potentially use the product being developed. Today I will look at works from Chapman and Milham, Matthews, Judge, and Whitaker, as well as Don Norman to understand the meaning of personas in the UX field and answer the question, are personas a useful means in UX research? When developing products, one of the aspects that is involved is the possibility of malfunctions. These malfunctions can occur because of a fault in the product or if the human or persona using the product creates a fault on their own. Developers understand that things are bound to go wrong, and Don Norman in his book, The Design of Everyday Things, understands this notion. He explains that there are 6 types of human errors that can occur. The first is capture errors, where an unfamiliar action is sequenced with a familiar action. I thought of muscle memory. So basically, every day you go to work, you go to the 7th floor, but on a particular morning, you had to go to the 2nd floor. But because you're so used to coming in every morning and pressing 7, you press 7 even though you were supposed to press 2. Next, we have description errors, which result in performing the current action on the wrong object. I thought of all the times that I blew on my ice cream to cool it down, even though it wasn't hot. Then we have data drive errors, which are triggered by the arrival of sensory data causing behavior that is not intended. When I think of data drive errors, I think of simple, number mix-ups. I thought of the time that I mixed up my home phone number with my cell phone number. So instead of telling the person my cell phone is 347, I told them my home phone area code, which is 718. There's also associative activation errors, creating error from association among other thoughts and ideas. This one was a tricky one for me, but I thought of the times where, you see people all the time at work, especially when you're walking through the hallway and you'll say, "Hey, how are you?" And then you just kind of keep walking. But there's been times where I embarrassingly say, "I'm fine," when really the person has said, "Hey, I like your shoes." You have the same script in your head for how the conversation is going to go, but then someone throws a curveball at you and then you've already said what you subconsciously know what's next, and it kind of messes up your entire thought process. We also have loss of activation errors, which simply means forgetting. This one was pretty simple for me. I thought of the many times I walk into a room and forget why I walked in, or the many times I pick up my phone and forget why I even picked up my phone in the first place. With all of these errors in mind, it makes sense why developers would want to create personas in order to tackle some of these human-centered errors. While it's simple to create and troubleshoot a guide for products, it's not as easy to create one for errors created by the user because users are so unpredictable. Matthew, Judge, and Whitaker, in their article, How Do Designers and User Experience Professionals Actually Perceive and Use Personas, noted that the use of personas is useful for developers to understand communication rather than design. They explained 4 reasons why designers don't use personas for design work. The first reason is that personas are abstract. It's hard to understand the abstraction process from the user data to persona, so personas come across as lacking critical detail. This one was interesting because in some ways personas are very vague. There are many different people in the world, and it's hard to create a character based off of data that isn't really data. It's more of your own opinions and ideas of what you think a person really is or who they really are. The second is personas are impersonal. Their personifying details and personas fail to provide a sense of empathy. In other words, personas are similar to creating a robot. You don't give them feelings. You don't give them, political views and ideas. They're just these caricatures that you make up, and even though you're trying to make them different from you, sometimes they are very similar to you in some ways because you don't really understand the complexity of creating a character. The third one is personifying details mislead. It's difficult to select personal details that do not create false constraints on the design problem. So, as a developer, it's harder to see the problems that a user might run into because obviously you're the developer, you're the one creating the product. So you won't really know or understand the problems that a user might face, which makes it difficult to make personas because how do you know as the developer what a user might run into, especially since most developers have a very hard time of seeing products from the user's point of view. And finally, the fourth one is personifying details distract. Personifying details make it hard to focus on the aspects of a persona that are critical for the design problem. As I said before, creating a character is very complex, and someone who is a developer doesn't have the time to really create a very complex character and understand the decisions that they might make and the way that they may feel. So in creating personas in the development process, you're not getting a full, detailed idea of who this potential user might actually be. For designers, personas aren't really effective. What would be more beneficial to designers is real-time usability testing. Chapman and Milham, in their article, The Persona's New Clothes, Methodological and Practical Arguments Against the Popular Method, made some very interesting arguments as to why personas are not useful in UX. They believe that personas are likely to lead to political conflicts and to undermine the ability for researchers to resolve questions with data. They also propose that personas represent only a small portion of the potential user space. They don't gather every potential user and have the chance to limit what could be. With all the praise around personas, it was interesting to see an opposing view from Chapman and Milham. Are personas really helping developers or just creating extra work? In a presentation given by Todd Zaki-Warfel, he explains that the average user doesn't exist. Sounds familiar? Yes. We've heard the same thing from Steve Krug in his book, Don't Make Me Think. He also believes that there is no average user. So this brings up the question, what are personas really helping us accomplish? An article from usability.gov explains that personas help to create reliable and realistic representations of key audience segments for reference. So while developing a product, personas can help developers think in the perspective of the persona they're creating in order to cater that product towards them. Chapman and Milham are skeptical of this, and for good reason. They state that fictional personas can conflict with other sources of data. Facts are important in the creation of any product, and the use of personas just doesn't fit into that concept. While they can be useful for some, personas seem to only slow down the creation process. I, however, believe that personas can be used in a different way. In other words, personas can be some sort of job description or casting call. It describes the type of person that the developers are looking for to bring into a room and conduct a usability test. I think personas in that sense can be very helpful to developers if the end goal is to bring in real people who in some ways fit the descriptions of the type of personas they want to use. Personas can either be a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's in the way that you choose to look at them and how you choose to make them benefit you. So all in all I say is that personas can be useful in UX research. I think it just depends on how you choose to use them in your research. Thanks for watching.